Hello and welcome to The Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2015 to 2016 series Midnighter. Midnighter was created in the late 90s for the superhero team called Stormwatch, part of a connected universe of comics published by the then independent Wildstorm Comics. Wildstorm would eventually be bought by DC Comics, though its universe would remain mostly autonomous until DC's The New 52, which would bring those characters into the reset timeline established in those comics. Midnighter himself was created by Warren Ellis, and so like many Warren Ellis creations, he's fueled almost entirely by excessive violence. More notable about the character, though, is his sexuality, and his long-standing relationship with fellow Stormwatch member Apollo, which has included, for a long time, actually being married, has been one of the most notable in comics. Of course, we are talking about the same company that refused to allow the Kate Kane-Maggie Sawyer marriage, so it probably shouldn't be surprising that Midnighter's and Apollo's first appearances in the New 52 established them as not being married. But they were still partnered up in the New 52, both romantically and in the new version of Stormwatch. By the start of this comic, both of those had come to an end, leaving Midnighter on his own. Just how dangerous is it to have a psychopathic superhuman Batman on the loose? Let's find out and take this away. The collection opens with a comic that probably couldn't be a better introduction to the character of Midnighter. Within an 8-page story, we see Midnighter waking up from a night of sex with another man, him cutting down a group of terrorists with extreme brutality, a gun that apparently marks people for demonic possession when they're shot by it, and Midnighter scaring the possessor out of a little girl just by talking to it. Sex, violence, tough guy talk, and ridiculous technology are pretty much the 4 cornerstones of this entire series, so if you have a problem with any one of those, then you might not enjoy this comic all that much. I'm honestly not big on having sex and excessive violence in my fiction, but I'm pretty cool with the other two, so let's give this a shot. The comic proper opens with Midnighter on a date with this guy Jason, until they get attacked by terrorists from the fictional country of Medora, whom he promptly deals with in what we can come to expect as his usual ultra-violence. As the actual first issue of the series, it's largely set up as well, so it gives a lot of Midnighter's backstory and introduces some concepts. First, there's the whole asset thing. Midnighter injects something into his date's neck that allows him to call on Midnighter from anywhere if he should ever need his help. Midnighter lives in his apartment, which was actually grown by some kind of living technology, and using it as a central hub, he is able to open doorways to anywhere he needs to go, traveling there instantaneously. The door technology was actually created by something called the God Garden. This seems to be an actual garden floating in space above the Earth, where they keep a number of experimental and dangerous technologies. It was apparently at the God Garden that Midnighter was made from whoever he was before into the Punisher-like vigilante he is now. The garden is run by a woman, fittingly named The Gardener, and she and a man named Henry Bendix, a classic Stormwatch character now turned mad scientist supervillain, surgically altered Midnighter to give him heightened healing abilities, immunity to most pain, some kind of superhuman speed, and a computer brain that predicts all the millions of possibilities a fight can have before it even starts, ensuring that Midnighter will always win. Despite the fact that they created him, Midnighter did not get along with his Frankensteinian parents, and has left home to seek his own way in the world. But just because he's done with the garden doesn't mean the garden is done with him, as this story really kicks off with someone somehow managing to use the door system to break into the garden. They attack the gardener, throwing her out into space and stealing its valuable and dangerous technology for their own, undoubtedly nefarious purposes. The first use we see of it comes with a young woman, Marina, who has lost her husband to a company, Windcrest Foods, that pushed through a product despite knowing that a small number of people were going to die from an exotic allergy. Someone claiming to be the God Garden is offering her revenge in the form of Lu Shai Ju, or killing sounds. When she speaks these weird Korean-looking symbols, I'm guessing does what their name implies, judging from the chaos she leaves in her wake as she rampages through Windcrest HQ. Midnighter shows up during the rampage, and she uses all 6 sounds on him at once, but somehow he's still alive afterwards, so she repeats one and he finally seems to die. The end. Nah, just kidding. He gets up, and in a shot that might be too graphic for YouTube, he pokes out his own eardrums to keep from hearing the sounds. That's just, vomitorious. He interrupts her meeting with the board, but reveals he's not there to stop her. He then proceeds to break the board members in ways that are apparently too gruesome even for this comic, because we don't really see any of it beyond this shot, just Marina's reactions as she takes maybe a little too much delight in the torture. Next, Midnighter's investigating a missing girl because there's a reactor from the garden that's fueled by children to turn old people young again. The old man, hoping to use it, hired this guy named Multiplex, who seems to have the ability to clone himself. Midnighter takes excessive delight in killing every last clone before getting his next lead to the next target in Moscow. So Midnighter heads to Russia with love because for some reason he kidnaps Dick Grayson, currently an agent of the spy organization Spiral, to bring him along for the ride. I guess they're tagging them back for all of Midnighter's appearances in Grayson? In Russia, there is a businessman who turns poor people into monsters like vampires and whatnot, so that rich people can pay to get their kicks by killing quote-unquote real monsters. Which, if YA fiction has taught me anything, is totally something rich people would do. Midnighter and Dick crash their party, but even further messed up, the rich people wired the captured fake vampires to disintegrate if anyone tries to tamper with them. Now, extra pissed about this whole situation, the duo brings the fight to the doorstep of Russian arms dealer Noe Akikievich, who is the one peddling all the God Garden tech. Akikievich is just the generic ultra-rich corporate villain, to the point that when Nightwing and Midnighter come bursting through his front door, he doesn't even get off the phone. Instead, he casually asks them to wait a minute so he can finish his conversation before dealing with them. Which, on the one hand, I feel like I've seen that move used a lot, but on the other hand, I do kinda love that move. Once they've shut down the arms dealer permanently, Midnighter and Nightwing share a drink in a seedy-looking hotel room. In the last panel here, their conversation seems to jump forward in time a bit, and I'm a little uncomfortable with the implications here. Already these two sharing a panel is a promise for lots of innuendo, such as earlier when Midnighter handcuffed them together saying, "Would I handcuff us just for fun?" To which Nightwing flat out replies, yes. But this image, with its mysterious new wet spot on the bed and Midnighter telling Dick to stop blubbering because it was a good time, comes off a little less innuendo and a little more rapey. I'm not sure they meant it that way, but given how carefully the rest of this comic is written, I doubt much is happening by accident. In less disturbing news, we learn here that the name of this issue is a Russian word, Polnochnik, which apparently means nightbird. I suppose that's close enough to Nightwing. Midnighter returns home to his boyfriend Matt in a Thanksgiving dinner, but they're interrupted by more multiplexers carrying a grudge and a giant minigun. Midnighter takes care of them with his usual penchant for violence, primarily using kitchenware like a fork and a meat tenderizer. Pretty sure it's literally impossible to throw a fork that hard though, as that would probably require something beyond its terminal velocity. I guess it's kinda late to be questioning the science of this comic, so whatever. Before we go any further, perhaps I should explain Matt. Matt has been in the story since the beginning. We first saw him cowering from the terrorist in issue 1, and then they began dating in issue 2, and he has been part of the story ever since. Midnighter has revealed himself to be a pretty vulnerable, emotional human being when he is alone with Matt, bringing a touch of realism and down-to-earth humanity that contrasts nicely with the absurd sci-fi violence that marks the rest of this comic. But now, those two worlds are coming together. First with Multiplex's attack on Midnighter's home, and next with Matt's father being attacked by people trying to get to Midnighter. They go to Matt's hometown to try and find out who the attackers were, but Midnighter is surprisingly unsuccessful. Finally, it becomes clear that the whole town was a trap, when Midnighter finally realizes something there is blocking the tech in his brain, preventing him from seeing the future. This leads to Midnighter making Matt's father's head explode by punching it, sending green microchip blood spraying everywhere. That's one of the goriest and least gory depictions of gore I've ever seen in a comic. Well done to artist Aiko, or ACO, or however that's supposed to be said. Though he realized the truth about Matt's dad, he didn't realize the truth about Matt, who stabs Midnighter and walks off to get into his own work clothes, revealing himself to be Prometheus. Say what you will about Prometheus, he dedicates to a part. The amount of sex and normal human relationship stuff he had to go through with Midnighter, all that woe is me vulnerability, just to pull off this sudden switcheroo, I get exhausted just making these videos every week. For those who don't know, Prometheus is an old DC villain, another of those what if Batman, but darker characters that DC seems to have way too many of. His parents, flamboyant robbers, were gunned down by police in front of him, and now considers justice a joke and wants to kill all heroes. He does make a good point about how Midnighter himself is really a criminal because he kills criminals, answering crime with the same act. Kinda hard to argue with that logic. He also is revealed to be the person who stole the God Garden tech and has been putting all these tasks before Midnighter. He also has Midnighter's file, so he's the only person in the world who knows Midnighter's true identity. He provides Midnighter with an ultimatum. let him go so he can keep killing innocents, breaking Midnighter's value system but giving him a chance to learn who he is, or kill him and lose that information forever. Midnighter opts for killing him because he knows who he is. He's the goddamn Midnighter. Whatever a Midnighter is. Prometheus doesn't seem to actually die though, clicking a button to teleport himself away, so I guess he chose kind of a middle path? The second volume focuses on Midnighter, facing off against the Suicide Squad. Deadshot breaks into a facility and steals the Perdition pistol, that gun from the opening that demonically possesses people that are shot by it. Given his history with the weapon, and feeling he owes them for the time that he kidnapped Grayson, Spiral recruits Midnighter to get the gun for them. He does it, getting up to the Suicide Squad satellite by being shot out of a giant gun himself. I agree with Midnighter's assessment of the situation. Yeah. But while he's up there, he discovers that Amanda Waller, the person in charge of the squad, is working with Midnighter's other creator, Henry Bendix. Bendix and Waller are trying to create a new ultimate weapon, like Midnighter 2.0. They're calling it the Unified, and it will have a combat brain like Midnighter's, plus access to Kryptonian abilities like Superman. But the squad isn't happy with Midnighter's interference, so they show up to pay him back with the help of a brand new member named Afterthought. Afterthought can work around Midnighter's computer brain because he has one of his own, one that lets him see into the future. No matter what Midnighter calculates, his movements will be counteracted by Afterthought's ability to see what he does. Defeated, the squad drags in Midnighter to torture him and learn more about Spiral, but he simply breaks free and follows them to Bendix. This doesn't go well for him either though, as Parasite is able to drain his abilities, leaving him an easy target. They send him out into a jet and blow him the hell up. The end. Nah, just kidding. See that little streak of light? That's Apollo. He rescues Midnighter and together they work to stop the squad and Bendix. Midnighter first brings down Parasite by stabbing him through the damn heart, knowing that with his healing abilities it won't kill him, just keep him down long enough for them to do what they need to do. He then stops Afterthought by tricking him into hitting him over and over again in places where he reinforces armor, so the attacks don't bother Midnighter at all, but leave Afterthought too worn out to move, giving Midnighter the chance to gruesomely break his arm. Yikes. But the team was too late to stop Bendix, and he unleashes the Unified on Medora, because that country apparently just has too damn many terrorists. But that means he's also killing plenty of civilians, which even Amanda Waller is unhappy about. She demands Bendix stop, but instead he launches into a big supervillain speech about purifying the world and blah blah blah, and Waller does exactly what I wish would always happen in the middle of a supervillain speech like this, and just snaps Bendix's neck, shutting him up. So satisfying. He turns out to be okay though, I guess, because of course he does, and teleports away just like Prometheus. Meanwhile, Apollo and Midnighter show up to stop the Unified. The Unified has Kryptonian DNA, but hasn't spent enough time under the yellow sun to get to full power, so Midnighter is able to use a sonic gun to pop the Unified's head like a balloon. Pretty nasty. The comic ends with a hint that Apollo and Midnighter might be close to getting back together, and a promise that though this is the end, it's also just the beginning. The collection also contains some bonus issues released years earlier under the Wildstorm imprint, including one written by Brian K. Vaughan that unfolds backwards, which is pretty great. But that's really neither here or there, so let's get to the breakdown. This comic unfolds in a crazy wild jumble, which somehow seems fitting for a story told about a character that's constantly predicting the future. Again, the sex and violence are a bit more extreme than I'm usually into, but the creators managed to make Midnighter into such a surprisingly compelling character and have such a fun and engrossing story that I find I really don't mind. Main series artist, Aiko, is also pretty top-notch, though I do find myself having serious problems following a lot of the action sequences. The other artists who work on this series are a little all over the place in terms of quality, like this guest artist. What is this? Humans aren't shaped like that. So all in all, I'm giving this series a recommendation level of high. While it has its fair share of problems, the overall product is so good that I find it hard to hold any of its faults against it. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you've been managing to stay cool this summer. I know it's been pretty sweltering here. Next week will be my first update for August, and a comic that I'm especially looking forward to. Hope to see you then, next time, right here in the Comic Cave.